Andrew, it's amazing what a couple of months will do. We were on this program talking about how the Prime Minister was caught out on a couple of key cost of living items. Now he's out the front of the servo.
Now it's his pitch. I'm doing a doorstop at a servo. Who could have picked that on February 1 when he couldn't name the price of petrol rapid antigens when I asked him at the press club? The polling's caught up with what I felt at the time, that the cost of living is a major issue. And the funny thing about that price at BP Mortdale today is it was cheaper than when I asked the press club question. So he says it's all about the war in Ukraine. Of course, that has a big impact. We had prices up to $2.20. When I asked the question, it was $1.80. Today it was $1.66. Prime Minister, I guess you've come full circle on this petrol price business, because 2 months ago at the press club you couldn't even name the price.
Well, what we were talking about a few months ago when we were looking at excise issues, that you weren't going to make any real difference to petrol prices by making some marginal changes. And what has happened over months now is as we've seen the invasion of Ukraine take hold, and we've seen the impact of that on petrol prices, and they were getting up over $2.20, up to $2.30. And now we see them at these levels because of the intervention that we've made.
It was only 4 weeks before the budget, and Scott Morrison said there was no point cutting the excise because the price can go up. And we know the budget forecast, Treasury's saying you only need to cut it for 6 months because hopefully prices will moderate, and whoever's in government then at the end of September will certainly be hoping that's the case. But there's no doubt there's a much bigger psychological feel from driving past those petrol signs than there is even from a tax cut. You really sort of psychologically feel paying that much for petrol. And of course, we know a lot of middle class families in Australia travel a long distance for work, etc. And it was a clever political move because of that in terms of the budget. But it does raise questions always when you throw around the cash like this and the payments that are about to go out just before an election. Why aren't you helping flood victims, for example? New South Wales government, they felt they had a handshake deal between Dominic Perrottet and Scott Morrison after the Lismore floods. It'd be 50-50 in terms of $112 million of build back your home grants. Instead, New South Wales government announced them yesterday because Scott Morrison wouldn't agree. You found the $2.6 billion for this measure. Why couldn't you find the $60 million or so for the Lismore flood victims? And the New South Wales government were under the impression that you were going to go halves in this $112 million back home grants. Yesterday they had to announce it by themselves. Why didn't you agree to go halves in relation to that?
Well, the Commonwealth Government has already invested, $2.1 billion in the New South Wales flood response. And directly, $1 billion has already been paid directly. Now that $1 billion that we've put in directly, that is 100% funded by the Commonwealth Government. And there are many other measures also, including $50 million to support anchor businesses in the Northern Rivers area, which is 100% funded.
I've been told there was a handshake agreement between you and Dominic Perrottet where you'd pay half of the back home grants. That's not the case?
No, I've written to the Premier again, stressing that we are very happy to share in the costs of that program for the 1 in 500 year flood event. That's what we undertook to do.
Why have they announced $112 million? Is the issue that it's outside Lismore, some of this assistance?
No, we've said we would go to those places that are impacted by the 1 in 500 year flood event, because the types of programs that they're pursuing are programs that are done by state governments.